Hello, everybody, and welcome to this, the latest edition of our Export to Japan podcasts. And this particular episode is part of the ongoing series we are bringing you in the build-up to Expo 2025. And all of our podcasts are very special, but this one is a very unique special one because in all the years we've been recording these podcasts, I think this is the first time I am going to introduce our guest, and then our guest is going to introduce another guest. And I realize that may sound a little confusing, but I think it will all become very clear in a moment when I introduce our special guest today, which is Carolyn Davidson, who is the Consul General in Osaka. Carolyn, welcome to the Export to Japan podcast.
Hey, Steve. Thanks very much. Great to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on board. And I know you are an extremely busy lady, so we're grateful to get a little bit of your time to talk to us today. Now, in addition to your day-to-day duties as the Consul General in Osaka, I also understand you have the title of UK Commissioner General for Expo 2025 in Osaka. Could you open up by telling us a little bit more about what that role involves and what a Commissioner General is?
Yeah, by all means. So an expo is where the world gathers together in one place. Next year, it will be in Osaka in 2025, and over 160 countries are participating. Our pavilion represents the UK, and I am essentially the UK's ambassador, the representative of the UK Pavilion, so the UK's ambassador to Expo, or the world of Expo, as it were. I'm very excited about taking on this role because it sort of expands on what I've already been doing here as Consul General in Osaka, but also has a much broader international perspective along with it as well.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. That's really interesting to hear about all the great work that you're doing. Now, I mentioned that we have another special guest that we're going to introduce, and that's Rupert Daniels. And Rupert is working with DBT. And I know he came over to Japan recently. And fortunately, you had the opportunity to sit down with Rupert and have a discussion, and we were able to get a recording of that conversation. So we're going to go on to that in a moment and learn more about Rupert's work. But just by way of an introduction to that, could you explain a bit more about what the relevance of Rupert's role is for Expo and how he connects in with all the good work that you're doing?
Yeah, by all means. A big part of our presence at Expo is about showcasing the best of Britain, the best of the UK, and exploring how we can build partnerships with Japan. And this is especially so in the business sector. We already have a hugely successful trade relationship with Japan, value of £27 billion. And we are looking to how we can use our presence at Expo to sort of highlight the UK innovation and expertise and use it to encourage more UK companies to be looking at the Japanese market. But also showcasing what the UK offers as an investment location as well. So there are two strands to it. Rupert's role is very much focused on the business program and encouraging those exports to Japan, which is also very much the focus of this podcast.
Well, that sounds fantastic, and what a great introduction. So I think that's a great cue for us to jump right on in now, and let's hear a little bit more from your discussion with Rupert. And Carolyn, you and I will come back in again to reflect on that after we hear this conversation. So over to you and Rupert now.
Rupert, welcome to Japan. Great to have you here. Perhaps you could say a little bit about what your role is in the Department for Business and Trade and what that has to do with the Osaka Expo.
Well, thanks, Karen. It's great to be back in Japan. So at the Department of Business and Trade, I work in the business group and I'm the Director for Creative, Consumer, Sport and Education. So that covers quite a wide portfolio. So even in creative, there's about 14 different subsectors. So that's everything from film, television, music, theatre, publishing, art, architecture, and a few more. And the consumer elements are things like agriculture, food and drink, and retail and hospitality, and obviously sport and education speak for themselves. So it's quite a varied portfolio, very diverse. but fantastic for exports and for leading up to the Expo, seeing how many of our great UK companies we can get to come out and supply the Expo more generally, but also work with us in the UK Pavilion and putting on the greatest show that the Expo has ever seen.
Great. You mentioned UK companies and providing services to Expo. UK companies do really well at these major sort of sporting and global events. We've just seen that in Paris with the Olympics and Paralympics. We see it with the Commonwealth Games. Are British companies winning similar sorts of contracts for Expo in Osaka, as far as you're aware?
Yes, I mean what we tend to see is there's a sort of a major events economy, and UK companies are extremely successful in supplying these sort of major events. So those could be in Olympic Games. So at the last Olympics in Paris, which has just ended, and the Paralympics as well, you had companies like ES Global and Wu Architects providing things like the volleyball arena, and if you remember the climbing where we won the gold medal, ES Global created the whole climbing arena. And funnily enough, actually some of the seating from the volleyball arena, which was underneath the Eiffel Tower, was actually reused and recycled from London 2012. So you've got a real pedigree going back to London 2012 and beyond, where these companies will literally go from major global event to major global event. And the UK is certainly one of the leading countries in the world at providing these services.
And other companies as well, I think. And ES Global, you just mentioned.
Yes.
I mean, they're actually providing the UK pavilion.
They are, and not only the UK pavilion. So they're providing, I think, if I remember correctly, the US, Canada, and Australian pavilions. So this one company is providing 4 pavilions on the site, but you've also got interior architects who are providing the content. So people like Barker Langham are doing a great job over here as well. Foster and Partners are designing a number of pavilions across the site as well. So what you've got is a network of UK companies who already before the Expo's begun have won many, many tens of millions of pounds worth of export contracts to build and fit out the Expo site.
And that's really interesting in terms of, the preparation for Expo and getting ready for it. What about when Expo is actually up and running? I mean, do you see an opportunity there for getting British companies involved, getting their profile better known across Japan?
Absolutely, and that's the essence, I think, of the business program. Because if you look at the type of audience that you'll see typically at Expo, and we had quite a lot of learnings from the previous Expo in Dubai. So the previous Expo in Dubai was delayed a year because of COVID. It was a huge site, but the primary audience is tourists and families. And in fact, probably about 75% of those were sort of domestic, or at least from within the Middle East. So we think there'll be a similar kind of profile in Japan. So predominantly Japanese visitors, but also from the region, wider region coming in. But that's where UK companies, we're thinking about the kind of themes. So there's going to be 7 themes across
8, I think.
8 themes, okay, across the whole of the site. And what we're doing is we're putting together sort of a bespoke group of companies who can really come and talk about and showcase the very best that they do. So whether that's healthcare and life sciences, so companies like AstraZeneca, for example, or creative industries, education, technology, what role will AI play? And you can see our slogan here, come build the future. So it's really an invitation to the world. And that's the great thing about the Expo. What you've effectively got is all of the countries all over the world coming together on one site to exchange ideas, exchange knowledge. So we want to make sure that UK companies are right at the forefront of those discussions. And whether it's in one of these 8 themed areas or indeed on our National Day, which is on May the 22nd. So we take over the whole site on National Day. So we'll have a great opportunity to really showcase everything from the length and the breadth of the UK, both from a sort of a creative standpoint, so our music, our culture, sports, but also some of these really innovative companies who are doing great things and helping to make the world a better place.
Excellent. This isn't your first visit to Japan, and I know you were here 20 years ago for the World Cup, but it'd be interesting to hear what your thoughts are on this visit this time.
Yes.
You're here in Tokyo now. You're going down to Osaka this evening, and I know you're going to go and see the expo site, which is going to be very exciting. But some personal reflections on Japan this time.
Well, personal reflections is I've got a bit of a sort of love affair with Japan, and I think actually it's not just me. I think when I came here 22 years ago, actually, so I was working for FIFA at the time, and I was based in Switzerland, and my job at the time was to run the World Cup websites and the commercial side of the World Cup website. So I worked with Yahoo, if you remember them. They were our sponsor for the World Cup websites, and the website was fifaworldcup.com. So I spent a lot of time traveling between here and Korea, but promoting, the fact that the World Cup had come to Japan and Korea for the first time. And I remember back then, the overriding feeling I had was just the warmth of the relationship between the UK and Japan. As an English person, I think the Japanese, to begin with, were a bit suspicious about, what would these, English football fans be like? But actually, it turned out to be a huge, huge success, and there was wonderful stories. And I remember going down to Osaka and watching one of the England games, actually. And I'm really excited to go back because I think that special connection between the UK, and I do remember everybody just at the time, David Beckham was he had a Mohican. In fact, I can tell you one very quick story. So I was here for a long time, about 6 months, because I was part of the organisation and actually building the infrastructure at the games themselves. And I needed a haircut. So it was getting a bit shaggy. So I went into a barber shop, and I didn't speak much Japanese, and they didn't speak much English. And they found one person who was actually I think the trainee who was sweeping up hair, who spoke some English. He said, "Oh, you like Beckham?" I went, yes, I like Beckham. So anyway, about 20 minutes later, I walked out with a Mohican. Which, when my boss saw it, what? And it kind of grew out fairly quickly. But I think that just kind of like that little story, maybe from a personal perspective. I've got a lot of fond memories of working in Japan, but from a business perspective as well, there's great connections. So our fashion designers do so well over here. The Japanese love Vivienne Westwood, Paul Smith, Alexander McQueen, and new designers which are coming through. When Oasis announced there were a reunion, that there's people who are flying in from Japan just to go to watch Oasis play. So, so whether it's music, film, television, or any of our other products, there's a great affinity between the UK and Japan.
Great. Well, we look forward to working with you over the next period to make it all a great success.
I can't wait. It's going to be a really exciting project. And I know, talking to the team back in the UK and to businesses in the UK, they're really, really excited about the opportunities for Expo and coming and building the future alongside the UK Pavilion.
Well, that was a great discussion, and really interesting to hear about that, and to hear about Rupert's views and his experience in Japan. I particularly love that little anecdote he gave us about the Mohican haircut. I thought that was so amusing, and I, like many people, I can remember those days, and I remember David Beckham with that haircut all those years ago. Maybe I need to go and find that barber in Tokyo and get myself a Mohican like Rupert did back all those years ago. But on a more serious note, really good to hear about all the areas of opportunity for the UK in Japan, particularly around Expo, and all the good work that's already been done. So it sounds like you had a great discussion, Carolyn. And any further thoughts from you on that after you've digested that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I hope that conversation showed was the scale of the opportunity around Expo. We talked about companies who are already providing services and goods to the building the infrastructure of Expo. And then, there's a whole new sort of phase that will be during the run phase of Expo, which is the showcasing of, as I said before, the best of the UK. I felt a bit mean correcting Rupert when he said 7 themes, and I said actually it's 8. So I'm a bit of an Expo geek, but it is the case that the Expo organisers are having 8 themed weeks throughout the course of the 6 months. I mean, they're called theme weeks. They're actually about 10 days long. And they cover a variety of themes, mobility, health, sustainability, creativity and culture. And what we're looking to do is align the business programme of the UK Pavilion around those theme weeks, so that, companies and countries will be able to do activity at the same time and benefit from that shared expertise and presence that will be in Osaka at the time. So yeah, a great opportunity for that, and it will represent not just opportunities in Japan, but also with the wider world. So we're very focused on how we can make sure we get our program activity aligned with those key themes, which are really important for building a healthier and more sustainable future.
Absolutely, it sounds wonderful, and just to recap on those points about how great it is to hear UK companies are already successfully winning tenders and have got work underway linked to the Expo activities, but also great to hear about all this interest bubbling up. And we're certainly hearing a lot of that at Export to Japan. A lot of companies are contacting us to hear more about the opportunities at Expo and how they can get involved. So really good to hear about that. And on that point, I know you touched on, in your discussion, you touched on some potential trade missions coming out to Japan and some of the regions in the UK getting involved in things. Could you elaborate a little bit more on some of those activities that are coming up?
I mean, it was great to hear Rupert talking about, as you just said, about the scale of the interest in the UK already about coming out of Japan. I mean, we already know Japan is an exciting market for many companies. We have a number of regional mayors and trade missions who are already looking to come out to Expo. We're expecting to have a steady stream of senior level visitors from government as well. So yeah, there will be a lot of activity. And I think, if people, having listened to this podcast, their interest has been piqued and they would like to explore more, then I think the best thing to do is probably contact your regional DBT office or your international trade advisor and see how we can take it forward.
Well, that's wonderful, and absolutely, they're great recommendations of what to do next, and thank you for those, Carolyn. Any of you that may be listening in, if you're not sure where to follow those routes, how to find your local DBT office, hopefully you know those contacts, but we shouldn't assume that you do. So if you need any help navigating and finding the right people, just reach out to us here at Export to Japan, and we will be happy to connect you up in the right direction for your inquiries. But in summary, Carolyn, thank you once again for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. Congratulations on all the great work that you and your colleagues and your team are doing so far. It's really impressive and encouraging to hear all the great progress that's been made already, and clearly lots more coming down the pipeline. And we look forward to catching up with you and working with you further as this program moves forward closer to Osaka 2025. And Rupert, if you're listening in as well at any point, thank you for your time as well. It was great to have your input as part of this podcast. So thank you for taking time too. So for everybody listening in, I hope that's been a useful update. I think it's been great to hear about all the great opportunities, particularly in those sectors that Rupert mentioned, the consumer, creative, sport and education, but then looking much wider at project management, architecture, design, and many, many others. Lots of opportunities coming up. So stay tuned to hear more about those opportunities as we bring those to you. So Carolyn, thank you once again. Lovely to catch up with you as always. And thank you for your time, and pleasure catching up with you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Great pleasure. Thank you very much indeed.